So what did we read? I remember
So
them
we read,
praying with Mary. Did we read the whole first chapter?
I think we read the whole, yeah, we read the whole first chapter. It starts with, uh, he kind of summarizes what Jesus says about the Holy Spirit over a period of, in the kingdom of God over 40 days. They're like, uh, is everything happening right now? He's like, nope. See you guys. And then they are praying. They choose, they say, oh, that's when we got into that, the two Psalms that Peter
Amazing.
quotes.
It was
Yeah.
59, was it? 69.
69 and 109. Yeah.
Yeah. Those
And
were
then they
both
cast
amazing.
lots. Yeah, they were insane. Super enlightening.
Mm-hmm.
And just another crazy, like another crazy example of David couldn't know what he was doing.
Not
he couldn't
exactly.
have known. Like maybe he was so filled with the Spirit and doing these things that he knew he was doing something that was absolutely true, absolute truth from God. Like he knew that maybe he realized he was doing something that was like, as he's writing, he's like immersed in this. He's obviously artistic. He was musical. So he's writing this poetry, like a song to God. You know, he's pouring his heart out, and maybe he's like doing this. He's writing these lyrics basically and going, this is way bigger than I thought. He's got this influence and inspiration from the Spirit. And he's like, this is so deep. This is amazing. Not like boasting about it, just being like, whoa, this is crazy. But he couldn't have known that it was literally true about the Messiah. I can't imagine that. The more we read about this, and it seems like through our Bible study of John, it seems that these people that were waiting for the Messiah didn't understand what the Messiah was.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
how could you?
Right.
Like we grew up hearing this story, but if you hadn't known that the Son of God was born in a barn, would you believe it? Like, I mean, or would you expect it?
Wouldn't expect it. Definitely wouldn't expect it. The people around growing up with Jesus, you can't blame them. God can, but we can't. We do most likely the same thing. The people, like, what was it we were reading? Oh, it might have actually been at a church service that they were going over this, that I was thinking about our study. But the people that grew up around Jesus, and then they're like, this guy isn't this Joseph's son? Like they literally say that. I think it's in Luke, probably towards the beginning. He opens up the scroll, he reads in the temple or in the synagogue, and he puts it away. And he's like, these things that I just read have been fulfilled in your presence. And they're like, this guy's crazy. But wait, we know this guy. Isn't the kid that was born in a barn? Like, so it's like, yeah, to your point, I think it wouldn't be expected, especially when you grow up hearing these stories of what the Messiah is going to do and how the kingdom of God is going to come to earth and to all people will be united under one name, type of like all this type of, and this very kingly imagery. And then, oh, the guy's born in a barn.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, the examples of the past had been more grand. I mean, at least I imagine in the Israelite mind, in the Jewish mind, the patriarchs of the past were more grand than that. Like they probably imagined Moses to be more grand than that. They probably imagined Abraham and David to be a certain kind of powerful, like spiritual, but also in a worldly sense, powerful.
I think they make that pretty evident. Even they say, are you above Moses? Are you above Abraham? They even compare to Jesus' face. They compare him to their patriarchs.
And then he's like,
well,
logos, baby.
Yeah. But, and David, I mean, exactly. That's a good example. You said David, like, yeah, even the judges, even the ones that weren't totally patriarchs, even the judges that were flawed. It's like Samson was flawed, but he was like, his story almost sounds like Greek mythology. He's like Hercules of the Bible. You know what I mean? He's this big, strong guy. And even like after his hair gets cut off, like he has one last hurrah where he brings down a building with his hands. Like there's that kind of stuff that they're expecting something when you have this in your mind over generations and these stories, and then you're thinking the Messiah has got to be better than this, right?
Right. So like, where is this trajectory pointing? It's some great conquering king, which is kind of right.
And it is right, just in a bigger way that like they're not seeing. They're still using short-sighted, mortal,
worldly,
very worldly type of standards to then judge these things by. And so then they weren't ready for what Jesus was, but no one in the world would have been, probably.
Right. Well, and that's why he had to come, and he didn't just tell people what was happening. He had to show them, and he had to show them by dying. And like, he's the word, he's the logos. So the life of Jesus is divine communication to mankind, because how else are we supposed to get it?
And so it makes me think that even the people of his day weren't ready for him. However many hundreds, if not whatever, maybe 1,000. I'm not sure. I'm not good with the timelines. But whenever David is writing these Psalms,
1000 BC, pretty easy to remember.
Oh, really?
But he conquered Jerusalem around 1000 BC. So he wrote the Psalms maybe a little bit before that.
Definitely like within that, probably 50-year period. So sure. So yeah, perfect. Literally then 1,000 years before Jesus. It seems hard to believe that he would understand, that he would have a full understanding of what was going on. That he would be thinking this is it, like that God would even impart knowledge like that like this seems like he's prophesying by accident. Almost.
It seems to me that he's just being honest, but that he's actually in the situation of Christ, because it's fractal. And one cool thing that I learned in the last couple of days is it's related to this idea that the thing that you aim at alters your perception. So if I aim at a goal, I begin to perceive the world in terms of affordances and obstacles relative to my goal. Like that's the most fundamental sense in which my reality has meaning, is, does this obstruct my goal, or does it permit me to move toward my goal? And if it lets me move toward, then I feel positive emotion. If it obstructs, then I feel negative emotion. And I divide my world into categories based on those two meta categories. And so this is related to that idea. When I aim at something, it is said that I aspire to that thing, right? Like I aspire to achieve a goal. Well, aspire is that's the same root word as inspire, and it means breath. So it literally means to like breathe towards something.
Oh, interesting.
But when I aspire towards something, I become inspired by it. Like you could say that I become filled by the spirit of my goal.
Interesting.
And especially when I really give myself to it. Like I remember when I was an investment banker, I was working really long hours. It was very difficult. And I was just thinking, how can I endure this? This is so hard. How can I not quit? And I thought the only way I can not quit is if I aim at something that's so good that it motivates me to work even more than I have to. Like I'm already working 90 hours a week. What could I aim at that would be so good that I would voluntarily work 95 instead of going home and getting extra sleep? So then I aimed at this target of, I'm going to invent Wells Fargo's first machine learning algorithm, because I was motivated by my ego. And I thought that was just the most impressive thing that I could think of. And I remember saying to myself, I will become whatever I have to become in order to achieve this goal. Like, I gave my soul to it. I will allow this to shape me, like who I am in the depth of my being, even though I didn't use those exact words because I hadn't read Aristotle yet. But that's what I did. And I achieved it, and it changed me. And it inspired me. So I aspired to this goal. It inspired me, and it shaped me. That is spiritual intercourse.
Yeah.
And it's not faithfulness to the one true God. But if I aspire to be faithful to God, if I aspire to faithfully represent him wherever he has assigned me, then I become inspired by his spirit. And he shapes me. That's the sense in which he's the potter and I'm the clay. It's like, in the same way I did with machine learning, whatever you want me to become is what I will become. Not just whatever you want me to do, but whoever you want me to be, I will become. Even if I have to change deep parts of myself, I will let you in to shape me. That is spiritual intercourse in the proper sense. And so then I become a certain kind of person. Well, David did that. He was a man after aiming at God's own heart. So he's inspired by the Holy Spirit, which Peter validates. And then he becomes a certain kind of person. And then it's the same kind of person that Jesus was. Not as perfect, but of the same kind. Mm-hmm. And so then when David just wrote about his life, it prophesied the life of Jesus, because reality is fractal, and what happens to a certain type happens in every circumstance. Maybe the particulars are different, but the essence is the same.
Yeah. I'm having a thought that's hard to articulate, so
you want to try it?
I'll try it. So it's like God has, I'm struggling to figure out a way to just express this appropriately, because there's one part of this that I'm kind of hanging up on, but it's like God, maybe out of justice, maybe just pure love, he's experienced all of reality, just like we have, other than sin. But he found a way to still experience sin without becoming sinful. He found a way to experience reality as we have experienced reality. Like, he's the creator of everything. And let's take the Psalms as examples. There are many songs of praise and goodness, about God's mercy, his love, his justice, his strength, a bunch of good things that God exhibited even just in creation. Just the very first thing, he showed those things. He doesn't show, like when David's talking about in Psalms, these things that men have done and crush your enemies and stuff like that. Like, these bad things that David's talking about experiencing don't really come from God. They come from sin. They come from man and the enemy. The mournful feelings that he expresses in those Psalms. So altogether, it's like God does not exhibit the sin patterns, but he still was able to experience the fullness of humanity. So even just in Jesus's life, he had the full human experience, because he had the love and the goodness, and then at least one of the worst, if not the worst, human experience you could possibly have, with his betrayal, death, all of the persecution he endured. There's a lot of terrible pains that people go through, especially nowadays. It kind of makes you wonder what technology is capable of putting a human being through. Pretty terrible. But at the end of the day, it may be just as a more extreme version of the same thing. Like, Jesus went through close to physical hell before experiencing spiritual hell. God experienced all of that. I think it's clear in the Psalms, when we're talking about this fractal thing happening and seeing it played out in Jesus's life, it seems that God has not just created reality, but actually understands our experience. I think he deliberately put himself. He can actually relate in a way that shouldn't be able to make sense
without compromising himself.
Right. But he found a way to do it. He found a way to like put it in to where it doesn't compromise himself, but he's still able to experience it. Crazy. What's so like, so when David's writing these Psalms, it's like, whether, no matter what the Psalms are, whether they're psalms of praise or mourning, when he's in this mode filled by the Spirit, all he really has to do is just speak from the Spirit. and speak out of a place of truth for what he's writing about. And then seems like this fractal thing, because he's talking about something that's so deep, it's transcending layers of reality.
That's a nice way to say it.
But it's really just that he's expressing the truth of God, I suppose. Like he's just expressing universal truth that God has created. So it actually is, it's a little bit more simple. Like we've been doing these things, and I've been getting my mind blown when we're reading these, and we're reading these things that happened to Jesus, and David wrote about 1,000 years ago, and we're like, he couldn't have known this. All he's doing is speaking truth. At the end of the day, he's just speaking the truth about reality, and all of it points to God, except the parts where he's deliberately talking about men. All of it actually points to God and what God has experienced it. It still is really trippy that when he writes something that it would be literally true in Jesus's life. That's still pretty crazy. Like very, very crazy to be more than, because what he's saying we can still see in Jesus's life, even the parts that aren't literally true, we can still see that, those fractal things, we can still see that pattern play out and go, yeah, that happened to the Messiah. Interesting. But when he talks about being nailed to a tree, and when he talks about like the betrayal in that one a while ago, the one that Jesus quotes during the Last Supper, and he's talking about the betrayal, and he talks like he plays out Jesus's last night and into the morning, whatever, his last 24 hours of life, with detail.
It's a level of accuracy that you wouldn't expect from something deep, like particular accuracy,
right? And that's what's so crazy about, like, on one hand, just taking it in macro for a second and looking at it, it's like he's just actually speaking the truth. He's filled with the Spirit of truth, and he's expressing that on paper about a particular thing. But he's fully a man after God's own heart. He's fully inspired by the Holy Spirit to be able to express this accurately. But the fact that it is that accurate, mind-blowing.
Well, okay, so I wonder, there are many particulars in our lives that are not meaningful, but some particulars are meaningful. Like, as I look around, I see, okay, it's like I've got this water bottle and it's blue. So I was going to say, I was looking around saying, like, there are many particulars in our life that are not meaningful. And then I saw this blue water bottle and I was like, well, that it's blue. But actually, it's kind of appropriate that a water bottle would be blue. And maybe the perfect water bottle would be either blue or like clear. I don't know. I'm thinking of David's prophecy that they gave me vinegar to drink, and I'm spilling water on my Bible. That's not good. Okay. They gave me vinegar to drink, and it seems like there is some particular cruelty in that. It actually was an instrument of cruelty, because the reason they would give them anything to drink is to prolong their torture. But they didn't want to just give them good water. They're not giving them like
every aspect of it was torture.
Right. Like, yes, like you're so desperate that you're going to drink vinegar, and it's actually going to keep you alive for longer. So like, yes, I will, like, you're almost forced to drink this nasty thing and then stay alive longer. There's something perfectly sadistic about it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if what David was talking about in that moment, like why he chose that particular example, was because it is a perfectly sadistic example. Like, it's the perfection of sadism to like give somebody vinegar to drink when they're thirsty. And somehow David could see that. And then somehow also the Romans discovered it on their own independently. Like the Romans weren't reading David thinking, what terrible thing could we do to somebody? Let's give them vinegar.
Right.
Like they were just sadists. And so they naturally came up with that idea. So I guess like, and then I wonder, that one's kind of clear to me. Like that makes sense. Could it be true about hanging someone on a tree? Like, I don't understand that one, but could that particular thing be the particular perfection of some deeper thing? Because I mean, maybe
it pierced my hands and my feet.
That too. Yeah. Could there be some perfection in that? Like some perfect irony somehow? The thing that comes to mind is like the tree of life. I mean, trees are very special things. And I know I talk about them a lot, but I don't think it's just my, like, I don't think it's just some Zach quirk, like just some personal quirk that makes me attracted to trees. I think that they're just actually special. Like, I think that they actually are here to speak to us. It's one of the clues of reality. Like it's branching embodied. That's what a tree is. And it's seasons embodied, like flowering and leaves and fruit embodied. I mean, it's such a deep symbol right in front of our eyes, all around us, of life, and also dependence on God, because they can't walk around. They just emerge wherever they're planted and they thrive. Why? Because they respond appropriately. Like a tree responds appropriately to a constricted reality. Like it can't move, but like, and to an extent we can't either. But if we would do what a tree would do in our own way, like we would thrive where we are, like wherever we are. And so then to have that thing cut down. Am I losing you? It looks like the connection might be getting a little blurry.
I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
That sucked.
No, it's all good. I was at the tree part, right?
Yeah.
And like, so we've got the tree of life. I noticed it blurring up, so I just stopped. So it's fine. I don't think there was anything wasted.
Okay.
So we've got the tree of life. It's stuck in one place, and yet somehow it responds appropriately to life, and it thrives right where it is, and everything that it needs is right around it, and it's this beautiful, gorgeous thing that's a deep symbol of life. So then maybe there's something particularly cruel and ironic about hanging someone on a tree, or like
I see.
Even a dead tree. So it's like, I'm going to take this tree, which is this deep symbol of life, kill it, and then plant it in the ground, and then I'm going to nail you to it. And I'm trying to think like what could be the necessary I'm trying not to speculate. I'm trying to deduce like what must be the meaning of this thing. And so I might not be right, but that's what I'm trying to do. So what is it to nail someone's hands and feet to a tree? If I'm nailing you there, I'm definitely like, you cannot move. Like I'm fixing you to this thing against your will. You can't move your arms and you can't move your legs. And what am I nailing you to? I'm fixing you to the tree, which represents life. So I wonder if it's like, oh, you think life is good? You're going to claim that this reality is good? That's easy for you to say when everything is beautiful, but there are terrible things about reality. And this reality is actually not good. And so therefore I'm excused in my falsehood and in my wickedness, because what falsehood and wickedness is betrayal of truth and goodness. Well, this reality is ruled by truth and goodness. I mean, obviously, everybody knows in their hearts that like this reality gives us a way that we should be. But you can decide the way that I am compelled to be in this reality is not good, because reality is not in my favor, because God himself is not in my favor. So I should rebel against God, because following God leads me to do things that are so terrible that a good God would never lead me to do them. So then what do? Is I take the tree, which is a symbol that God has given us of life, and I kill that tree. And then I'm going to nail you to it. Like, you want to embrace life? Here's life. And now you can't escape it. Let's see what you do when you can't escape life. Like, you don't have the option of falsehood here. How can you be false when you're hanging on a cross? Like, you're exposed. Whatever you are is going to come out. Like, you're naked before the world. Like, your soul is naked before the world in a moment like that. And then what we saw in Christ is continued faithfulness. Like, Christ was true and faithful to God unto death on a cross. Like, the most horrible thing. Like, I will still believe that the creator of this reality is good and that he is worthy of my faithfulness. What the sadist would like to see is, oh, holy man, you think you're so pure, you think you're so great, let me show you how brutal life really is. And then I nailed them to the cross, and they're like, I'm sorry, and they're screaming and they're crying and, right, like, humiliated.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to see. But then instead I see a man who says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And all of a sudden I can see God is more powerful than the worst suffering of this reality. And that it's through our faithfulness during suffering that he's revealed. It's in our moments of greatest suffering that we have the greatest opportunity to glorify him. I've just betrayed him. That's why I'm weak. That's why I cave. That's why this feels impossible, because I've sinned against him. Because here's a man who hasn't, and he doesn't cave, even when he's nailed to a tree. So I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think the key idea that I'm pondering is, are some of the particulars of Christ's death necessary because they are the perfection of irony? They're it's like perfect blasphemy to cut down a tree and to nail the perfect man to a dead tree.
And it's well, because this somewhere, maybe in a psalm, I don't know, I'm not a scholar, but it talks about a death on a tree being like some sort of cursed thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. Why?
Before the Romans crucified, there are evidences of people not hanging, but like people being tied to things, like and put up on a, basically hung from a tree, but not like by a rope, similar to something that Jesus endured, but not exactly the same. Like in Babylon, maybe that's part of it, because Babylon was like pretty much their worst enemy forever. Babylon, or some sort of like offshoot of Babylon, is like, so maybe that's why. I don't know. It's not like the Romans weren't the.
What's the Babylon connection?
That they did that type of thing, basically crucifixion.
Okay.
Not on a cross, not on a crucifix,
but on a tree.
Basically on a crucifix. Yeah, a big piece of wood that was chopped down, cut up, and they put people on it. So I'm trying to figure out, like, well, why do they call it a? So I'm just trying to speculate. Like, is that maybe does that have some sort of connection? Why would they call this death cursed? And it is interesting what you're saying. It makes it seem like, okay, that could be a cursed thing for sure. That's a cursed image, in that the way you're describing it, which seems it's really good. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how true it is, but I'm inclined to think it's actually pretty true, because you made a very good case for it. The like sadistic irony and the blasphemy of hanging somebody on a tree.
Yes.
Not hanging somebody from a rope, but putting them, nailing them, tying them, doing whatever to a tree, and then putting them through torture.
Yeah, like it's yeah, right. It's blasphemy, it's sadism, and it's irony. Like it's because it's not just a curse against the man, it's a curse against God to do that to someone. Like in action, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it is also undoubtable that the people of the ancient world took even things around them much more seriously, symbolically seriously, than we even can comprehend today. So when you're talking about the symbology of the tree, and even in many religions, there's a kind of a thread of this idea of a tree of life. A tree is a very powerful religious symbol historically, and not just in Christianity. I think it's probably not, I mean, people know of the tree of life, but it's not even that big in Christianity. I'm talking about, like, you know, Norse mythology, they literally have the world tree. Like, and other, like, trees are a big deal. And people of the ancient world, things were so much more precious to them because it wasn't just like something taken for granted. People don't even think about trees nowadays, it seems, you know, unless you're like a nature activist.
Yeah.
Like,
in which case they're not thinking about it really in the right way.
Not in the right way. But like, people don't think about what you've described with the tree that are true symbol. Like, you're describing something true about the nature of the tree and the symbol of the tree. People don't understand that. They wouldn't think about that. People in the, I would think, and I could be wrong, but I would think that people in a more ancient time would make connections, because it seems like they did, to everything. Connections like that to a tree, or they would hold something like a tree a little bit more dear, because for them, they actually needed it for survival, for example.
And they worked with it. They had a closer relationship with it. It was
Right.
more like they would actually go and take their food off of it.
So something like this sadistic irony was probably not lost on people that were like less knowledgeable than we are today, but that had a more intimate relationship with these natural things.
Including maybe the person who said, however they said it, like, cursed is the man who is hung on a tree.
Right.
Like, maybe whoever wrote that saw, like, they came into contact with the same thing that you and I are coming into contact with right now.
Well, and maybe the people enacting the punishment know, like, maybe they're looking at it and they're going, what's the most, like, just in naturally in the world, like, even if they're not thinking like to spit in the face of God, they're just thinking, what's the most cruel thing we could do to a person? And make it cruel on many levels. Like, let's make it cruel physically for them to endure, but let's make it cruel on a spiritual level based on this connection with this thing. So this thing that the only reason you would cut it down is to build shelter or to provide you warmth. Let's instead cut it down and put someone through torment.
Yeah, to torture someone.
This thing should be alive and thriving and branching and being beautiful. The only reason you would cut it down is almost out of like, it's your partner. I'm going to cut you down, even though you're beautiful, because you're going to provide me with shelter and you're going to provide me with warmth.
Yeah,
instead,
and thank you for your sacrifice.
I'm going to kill you. Yeah, but instead, I'm just going to put a corpse on it. And you're now just a gross ornament on something that should be beautiful. So you're the cursed one. You're hung on the tree. You're gross. This thing should be beautiful, and you're making it ugly. It's almost to say to
contrast.
Yeah.
It's
Which,
wrong.
yeah.
Yeah. There's there's a song by what's her name? Billy something? Strange Fruit, talking about how lynch mobs would hang
Uh,
black people on trees, and that you would, I guess, walk around and time to time you would see this, like a body on a tree. And she wrote this song called Strange Fruit about that. And it's this drastically understated irony. It's like, that doesn't belong there.
Crazy. Yeah. Wow. That's so crazy. We could go on about this because that's so interesting. It's a really like, this is a really interesting, and like, even this, the like the grossness of it and the blasphemy and the horror of this idea is like, it's like strangely beautiful to be able to recognize it, to recognize how bad it is. It's almost like it makes the mourning a little bit more beautiful. Like the more that's a hard, I'm trying to figure out how I'm trying to say this, but I think you probably kind of get where I'm going.
I think I maybe do. And I think so. Tell me if this is what you're getting at. This thing is perfectly terrible in a sense. It's almost perfectly wrong. It's like the perfect embodiment of what you should never do
It's a fractal version of something horrible.
at the extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, like, terror and mourning is actually the holy response, if I can say that. Like, it's the right response. It's
And being able
exactly
to,
how.
and being able to see it completely. I think that's what makes it like, it makes the mourning more complete, because you see something with understanding. And so mourning is the appropriate response. And being right, like being sad at someone's death is the correct response, especially
Mhm.
someone innocent, right?
Yeah, like it's not just you're not just crying because you don't like it. You're crying because it's wrong.
But being able to see how wrong it is and then being able to mourn makes the mourning more complete and full.
Man, one of the most amazing spiritual experiences I've had in my life happened because I was imagining Mary at, like, watching the crucifixion of Jesus. Like, to
Mm.
play that scene through your head and watch it through her eyes, and knowing the story, like, this she was like 14 maybe when the angel came to her and said, "You've been chosen. You are favored by God. You are going to bear a child that's going to be given to you by the Holy Spirit." And she knows people die for that. Like, people die, and she was betrothed to Joseph at the time. Like, she felt that fear of, I've experienced this, I've seen this angel, I've been told this thing, I know that it's true, but nobody's going to believe me, and they're going to want to kill me. And then the angel comes to Joseph after, and, like, can you imagine what a relief that would be to her?
Hmm.
Like, I'm not alone in this thing. Like, I'm experiencing this miracle, and, like, my husband believes me, and he's not going to kill me, which, if his misunderstanding were correct, would actually be just in that time and place. Like, he knows the truth, and he's with me, and, like, he's going to suffer this with me and raise this child with me, even if we have to go to Egypt to protect him. And then raises this child, and it says in Luke, it's so beautiful. So all of these amazing things come along. Like, I mean, she's pregnant, she goes to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's miracle child jumps in her belly.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she's sharing it with Elizabeth, who's her cousin, I think,
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
but older. And then the angels come to the shepherds. Then Christ is taken up to Jerusalem, And Simeon prophesies. Some guy that they don't know comes up and he says that Jesus is a light of revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people of Israel. And his father and mother were amazed at the things which were being said about him, Jesus. And Simeon blessed them and said to his mother, behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rise of many in Israel. And then Anna, the prophetess, says something similar. She comes up and is giving thanks to God. And then it says this. So they've had this baby, this miracle baby. She didn't have sex. She had a child. They both watched that happen. And then these people are prophesying. And then it says the child continued to grow and become strong, increasing in wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him, which kind of answers a question you and I have been asking for a little while. Is like, how human was Jesus really? Like, was he actually totally human? Well, he grew and he increased in wisdom, which means at some point he was an actual baby.
He was born. Yeah, he was born as a baby.
Yeah.
He grew. Yeah.
Yeah.
Human, by the way.
Mm-hmm. And then they raise him, and who knows how many stories Mary and Joseph could tell of just like amazing, miraculous things happening around Jesus. Not that he's turning water into wine, but just that like this is not a normal kid.
Yeah.
And what a blessing it would be. He's the child every parent wants, because it's like, can you imagine you give Kit to Eden's parents and then they're tempting her to like betray you, and she's like, no, my dad wouldn't want me to do that.
Oof. Gosh.
How proud you would be.
Oh my gosh.
That's what Jesus would do. Even there.
Imagine what it was like to be his half siblings. That must have kind of
yeah, pretty tough.
That must have been pretty rough. But anyway.
Yeah. So they saw all this happen. And then when Mary, like, Jesus's first miracle is to turn the water into wine, and Mary's like she's pretty nonchalant when she asks him to do something impossible.
Yeah.
That's his mom, and she's just like, come on, Jesus.
Can we do this?
We've got this thing. We're in on this secret. Everybody thinks that water can't be turned into wine. I know who you are. Come on, they're out of wine. Do your thing.
Do the thing.
He's like, Mom. She's like,
come on. He's like, what does this have to do with me? And then ignores him. She's like, just do what he says to the servants. That's what it says. Just do what he says, and she walks away. She knows who he is.
She knows, and he has been the perfect child until like for 30 years. And then she goes and watches him, and he's doing all these amazing things. Like, she's around when he's healing people, and there are massive crowds coming to him because they say, your mother and brothers are outside, and he says, these are my mother and brothers. So they're watching his fame grow, and they knew, like, definitely Mary knew, and she's watching this play out, and it must have been amazing to see. But she's like, this is who he is. People were bound to find out sooner or later that he is the greatest man to ever live. That's my son. And then to see what's up.
And then, right. What we're getting to.
that like he's captured, given to she's probably standing there when Pilate brings him out with the crown of thorns, beaten, bloodied. Brutally, like, flogged in a way that actually killed many people, doing the same thing that was done to him. And like, how heartbreaking that would be to the mother of any son, but especially this one, because it's not just, you're hurting my son. It's that I know that he's perfect. He's a miracle child. He was placed in my womb by God. Who do you think you are, you idiot, to do this to him? And I love him. And I don't want him to feel pain. And then here he is, brutally beaten and mocked in front of the crowd. And I'm watching this whole crowd scream, crucify him. And I'm like your heart, to watch that. And then they begin taking him away, and you're just like, no. And he's carrying the cross, and he goes up and he's crucified. Just the horror that you would feel in your spirit. I mean, it's like the integrity of horror in that woman in that moment, to know exactly what's going on and to be so emotionally connected physically. He came out of your body and you love him as your son, and he's the son of God, and the whole world has murdered him. Like, it was when I was contemplating that scene, like, I think I told you about this. It was like reality started to just kind of like rip open. It was almost like reality, like everything that was in front of me. I mean, I was wearing a blindfold so I could sleep, so the light wasn't getting in my eyes, so I wasn't actually seeing anything. But it was like this, and it was just like of this awesome light, and I was like, I'm wearing a blindfold and I go like this. It gives me chills to remember it.
But I remember you telling me about that, but I was not. You probably told me back then when you shared this experience with me, but I was not remembering that this is what you were contemplating that led you to this experience.
Because somehow it's like in the depth of horror, there is God. Like I don't totally understand it, but it's like, I don't know. It just had to, like, there's something there. There's like, duh, but like, there's something in the crucifixion that's really important.
Yeah.
It means something.
And there's something about Mary's experience that is reminiscent of this thing that we're talking about, like which is, I think, why he brought it up, right? This idea of, wow, maybe they deliberately chose this symbol for how horrible it is. When you look at everything symbolically, maybe this idea of putting someone on a tree is really, really gross. And so the mourning is complete when you are understanding all the symbology, when you're able to see the multiple layers at the same time, and you're like disgusted. That appropriate response is it's a reflection of God, in a sense. Like, yes. It's a reflection of, because that's the right thing to do in the face of something horrible, is be disgusted. It's like a whole fractal, multi-layered representation of evil. And so the appropriate response is disgust. That's how God reacts to sin.
Wow.
And so there's a level of righteousness in mourning when you mourn appropriately. And so that's what we're getting at here when you're talking about Mary, is her experience was complete. Her mourning was beautiful because she was the only one on earth that could have had the human experience of that mourning. Her mourning was probably the human representation of what God in heaven was feeling.
I think you're exactly right. That's what's so powerful of imagining that scene through the eyes of Mary, is because that's the closest thing to imagining it through the eyes of God.
Mm-hmm.
Which just makes me want to like cry just thinking about that.
Yeah. It's so sad.
And yet it's like, man, remember we had a conversation the other day about contemplating the crucifixion, like, why did Jesus have to die? And we said maybe we will never get to the bottom of it, but maybe it's an eternal fountain of wisdom. Like, maybe every time we contemplate the crucifixion, we can squeeze more juice out of it, because it's not like a lemon with a limited amount of juice. It's literally a fountain of eternal wisdom, eternal life. Like, that's
yeah.
And then here we are again doing it, and there's more.
Well, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Turns out we didn't read any of Acts, but
that's okay. I heard something
it was
lately
so good.
that, yeah, it's really good. I heard something lately that said something along the lines of, like, the Bible is not an end in itself. Like, even the Bible is a means to an end, which is direct contact with God.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, like, this thing is words on a page. It doesn't mean, I mean, there's much more behind it than the words on the page, but the thing that I hold in my hand is words on a page. Like, it leads you into contact with God. And so I think if we can come into contact with God by contemplating the crucifixion or something else, even the meaning of trees, because like, how is a tree not a word from God? Like, that's exactly what a tree is. A tree is a word from God. Why do we have those? So that we can know what's going on here. I mean, they speak for him. So is it really so different to contemplate a tree than it is to contemplate, Acts chapter 2? I don't think. I mean, I think as long as we're coming in, if we're spending our time on these calls coming into contact with God together, that's success to me.
100%. Yeah. I always think it's funny, but
It's funny.
will never be upset when we. I'll only be upset at myself when we don't start a Bible study because I've been rambling about something stupid for 20 minutes. That's the only problem.
Well,
but I appreciate
on that note, I know that might not be what you mean, but I don't think, I mean, I thought it was good for us to talk about the Christmas stuff too.
Yeah, but I never will. I will always be okay with going, oh, what did we read last time? What do you think about this? And then an hour later, we're like, oh, so next time, I guess we'll just like maybe actually jump into the second chapter, but I'll never be upset about it.
Yeah. I love doing this with you, man. One year of really great study, like life-changing study, a really amazing friendship. I'm very glad to know you.
Likewise. Yeah, I feel like this is in a short time, this has gone very far.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Okay. See you.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too.